Is this close enough? Yes. Yep. As we all know, comedy is rooted in tragedy, it's rooted in failure, and I'd like to share with you a small story that relates to my life, where I had a go at doing comedy and it failed miserably. So hopefully you'll be able to pick up some life lessons from where it all went wrong. This is where it went wrong. It went wrong in Newcastle, it went wrong in a comedy club, which is in the shadow of St James's Park. It happened in June of 2003, and I'm still so traumatised by it now that I still can't read Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix because it came out the day before I did all of this. I was invited to appear as part of a comedy roadshow for finding new comics in the UK, and I thought I could have a go at doing that. I've been a lecturer, I've made medical students laugh, but it didn't work out that well, so I needed a script. So I thought, what was the funniest jokes in British TV comedy, in British TV history? And the funniest one is a Dell falling over. The second funniest is Don't Tell Him Pike. But that requires, both of those require a bit of a setup. And slapstick is difficult to do on stage. Hubris, which is what this is also quite difficult to do without a setup. So I thought I'd go for a slightly longer routine. And so I looked at the Dead Parrot sketch, which is the longest list of euphemisms for death that you can possibly imagine. But it's still hilarious. But this is a willful ignorance. It's battling against a bureaucracy. So instead, what we have are three things that I rejected: slapstick, hubris, and death. Remember these. Instead, I thought I'd go for the sort of Ronnie Corbett thing, the long, rambling story with no point. I wrote my script. I spent the day before, instead of learning my script, dyeing my hair, going for lunch with friends, going to see some art. I had a really nice day in Newcastle beforehand, and it all just went horribly wrong later. So I got to the comedy club. Everybody was there to see one person, and they were there to see their mate, and they weren't going to give anybody else an easy ride throughout the evening. There was a couple of acts. There was one act was like 2/3 of the audience came to see this one guy. Another act was somebody talking about wanking. There was the person who was dressed in a sheet mask who just threw plates at the stage until he was booed off. So my turn came round, and this was after the interval, so everybody had buggered off because they all came to see this guy in the first act. And I heard this welcome Mike from the compere, except what I'd just done was crashed his joke, because his name was Mike and he was telling the audience about the time he first did stand-up, and it all went horribly wrong. So I leapt up onto the stage, then realised it wasn't my turn, turned round, then he said, welcome Mike again, so I turned round again and face-planted the stage. I looked at the audience, I made a joke, an ad-lib about being a Scouser in Newcastle. That was a terrible mistake, because what I did was forget the opening line of my spiel. I had no idea where I was up to, so I stood there for 10, 15 years, staring at the audience, and I swear to God I heard a hyena howl in the background. It was terrible. But eventually I got my place back and I knew what I was talking about. It was actually a big, long, rambling joke about Bettakultcha. Don't Google it, okay? Just don't. It's disgusting. If you're laughing, you're pervert. So, but the point of the joke was about how, if you saw it written down, you could mistake it for being a book about cake. This was in 2003. Internet penetration didn't have the sort of thing that it had at the moment, and Japanese fetishes never really got into the culture. And let us not forget, this was in Newcastle. I'm not saying it's the end of the earth, but it's not quite as well saturated as Leeds is. So I was trying to do this routine about a fictitious grandmother coming into Christmas, and I was opening this book that I thought was about cake and screaming. And it just went totally wrong, because I didn't prep enough. So remember, slapstick. I fell on my face as I got on the stage. Hubris, I didn't prep enough, I dyed my hair. And death, because there was no way you could describe anything as, like what I did up on stage, as anything other than dying. It was terrible. It was a major embarrassment. And since that day, I've never been able to do stand-up. It's a life lesson. I think there's a couple of life lessons that we can make here. First is, don't ad-lib, unless you know what's coming next. Second is, don't do stand-up in Newcastle, unless you're a Geordie, or talk about wanking. Thank you very much.